Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Chloe Feng. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Labor chief warns bosses not to ignore guidelines on preventing heat stroke. Government advisor says COVID outbreak has yet to peak, but social distancing measures are unnecessary. And on the eve of Mother's Day, a social group highlights the predicament of child carers. Employers have been warned not to flout guidelines on protecting workers from heat stroke. Labor Minister Chris says violators will be punished, even though the color-coded warning system is not legally binding. Janice Low reports.
From Monday, outdoor workers will be better protected in summer. That's because the Labor Department is launching a 3-tier color-coded heat stress at work warning. Workers will be allowed to rest or even stop working temporarily to avoid heat stroke. Although the guidelines are not legally binding, employers have been warned not to ignore them.
For those who have clearly violate the guidelines in a very blatant way, we can pursue them by using the employer's general duty under our law. So eventually they are subject to legal punishment for those who just turn a blind eye to the guideline.
The amber, red, and black alerts will be based on the observatory's heat index. However, between 2014 and 2021, the index never reached a level which would require a black warning, and only on 4 days a red alert would have been needed. Sun said the heat stress warning levels could be adjusted later. The labor chief also expressed concern after 2 men were stung by bees while working outdoors yesterday. Both became unconscious and one died, while the other recovered. Sun said it is crucial for employers to provide adequate protection in workplaces. Janice Low, HKIBC.
2 mainland fishermen have been arrested for illegal entry when they arrived in Saigon in an unsuccessful attempt to save a colleague who got into trouble at sea. Officers escorted the men in their 40s into a police vehicle at Silver Strand Beach. They alerted police themselves after arriving in Hong Kong waters in a speedboat. They brought along a third man who was certified dead after being taken to Chung Kung Hospital for emergency treatment. Reports said the accident happened in Daya Bay, opposite Saigon, when the men were diving for fish and seafood. A bracelet worth over $5,000 has been recovered after a man who robbed a gold shop in Kuntang turned himself in. CCTV footage shows the man, who is a security guard, smashing a glass showcase with a hammer. The incident on Mokwa Street happened at about 1 p.m. yesterday. The man fled with a dragon and phoenix bracelet, but staff in the shop managed to grab his backpack. His phone and staff card were found inside the bag. The man surrendered to police 9 hours later and was arrested for attempted robbery and possession of an imitation firearm, which officers found. The bracelet worth $5,700 was recovered from a pawn shop. Police suspect the man tried to find money to repay a $100,000 gambling debt. COVID infections in Hong Kong have continued to rise, but the government pandemic advisor David Hui says there's no need to return to social distancing measures unless a high-risk subvariant emerges. The city's public hospitals are under immense pressure because of a surge in flu and COVID cases. Emergency departments are crammed with an average of over 6,000 patients each day. Children under 5 years top the hospitalization rate. Government pandemic advisor David Hui said flu infections had peaked at the end of April, with the infection rate dropping from 20% to 9.8% this month. But COVID cases in the current outbreak are rising and have yet to peak. He blamed this on the waning protection from vaccinations after 6 months and the stronger ability of the current dominant XBB Omicron subvariant to withstand jabs. but Hui said there's no need for social distancing or mask-wearing rules.
Just to make sure that we know what variants are circulating in Hong Kong, and also make sure there are no new variants coming. But at the moment, all the variants, although they are very transmissible, but the severe cases and fatality rate actually are not increased. So I think we just treat it as any endemic respiratory virus.
Still, Hui advised people in high-risk groups, including the elderly, pregnant women, and healthcare workers, to get another booster shot for extra protection. A Qingchao school, which has been granted permission to run privately funded Primary 1 classes, has held an open day to encourage enrollments. Parents and residents were impressed with the robotic settings created by students to simulate the island's renowned bomb scramble. The Education Bureau had earlier disallowed the Qingchao Church Kamkong Primary School from operating subsidized Primary 1 classes. That was because its enrollment for the coming academic year was one short of the 16 required. But a plan for a privately funded class was approved. The principal said the school will apply for government funds again if it has enough Primary 1 students for the 2024 to 2025 academic year. A woman has been arrested in a case of suspected animal abuse following the death of a cat which fell from a building in Wan Chai. The animal plunged from the 15th floor of a building on Hennessy Road this morning. It hit a moving vehicle before being thrown onto the road. The incident frightened the driver, who called the police. Following an investigation, officers arrested a 40-year-old woman who claimed to be the cat's owner. A social group has urged the government to strengthen support for parents and others who look after children. A survey found that parents devote an average of 12 hours daily on their offspring. Janice Low reports.
On the eve of Mother's Day, a social group has called for more support for child carers. The group Care for Carers recently interviewed over 700 parents, almost 97% of whom were female. Despite not having a full-time job, they spent an average of 12 hours looking after their children. The survey found that most of the carers' difficulties were money-related. Most tried to cut corners in various ways, such as not consulting a doctor when sick. But more than 30% were forced to turn to their families or banks for help.
They need to spend a lot of money on their children. For example, they need to spend money on the training if their children have SEN situation. And also they also have to bring the children to some interesting class or extracurricular activities.
Lam pointed out that over half of the carers sacrifice their careers for their children. She said it's even harder for single parents or those whose children require special education and medical needs. Care for Carers urged the government to help out with higher allowances.
Because children are the public property in the society, so actually the government should bear the responsibility to help to take care of the children.
The organization added that the government should set up a 24-hour hotline to provide carers with emergency assistance and emotional support. Janice Low, HKIBC.
Political satirist Zun Zi has ended his 40-year association with the Chinese-language Ming Pao newspaper, saying a garden of freedom requires free soil. His last illustration showed a building named District Council crushed by the weight of unauthorized work. And in a 3-panel comic strip, Zun Zi featured 2 characters smiling despite the rain and waving goodbye. Zun Zi says he has no plans to draw cartoons for other publications as he has a backlog of work. Sharing his thoughts, he urged people to work hard together. Overseas, the European Union says its relationship with China will suffer if Beijing does not persuade Russia to end the war in Ukraine.
For us, it's so important that Russia understands that it is China understands that it is an existential threat for us, what's happening in Ukraine. That we expect that China will use its role and its responsibilities. If this is not the case, our relationship will not be so good.
As the fighting rages on, a Chinese envoy is preparing to visit Russia and Ukraine on a peace mission. Ukraine, meanwhile, says its troops have made advances in the eastern city of Bakhmut. Russian forces are reported to be struggling to keep hold of the city. The US-Mexican border is relatively calm, but tens of thousands of migrants are lingering there, confused over new regulations for asylum seekers.
It is so unfortunate that the rumor mill is so alive and so pervasive with all kinds of things being said to people. Many of the people clearly should have the opportunity to present their claim for asylum. Some do not have a sufficiently strong asylum claim, but they should still have the opportunity.
Migrants were forced to camp on the streets of the Texan border town of El Paso because detention centers and aid facilities were overcrowded. Border Patrol agents have arrested more than 60,000 people who entered the United States illegally in the past week. Former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khans has been given a hero's welcome on his return to his hometown of Lahore after being freed on bail. A court in the capital, Islamabad, granted him a 2-week bail yesterday, but he could be re-arrested soon. His vehicle was showered with rose petals as thousands of his supporters greeted him. The arrest of the cricketer-turned-politician on corruption charges earlier this week triggered nationwide protests that claimed at least 8 lives. And onto the weather now. Frequent heavy showers with thunderstorms tomorrow. Temperatures will range between 21 and 24 degrees. The unsettled weather will ease gradually next week. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. And that is our main news for Saturday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Chloe Feng. Thanks for watching. Good night.